Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. Order today at PureSoapFlakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild. Is your credit in bad shape? Do you need a new car? Ready to buy a new house? You want to rent an apartment? Are you going to apply for a job? Any one of these activities, they're going to ask for a credit report and then check out your credit score. Let Dynamic Solutions 2 erase your negative credit remarks. They offer a life-changing, dynamic financial solution. The finest in fast, professional, affordable credit repair. They have affordable monthly prices. They accept Visa, MasterCard, PayPal options available. You go to www.dynamicsolutions2, that's the number 2.com, or call 424-888-2820. Now, if you enter promo code ED or you mention Ed Opperman, you get a 10% discount. How's that? You get a free consultation, all negative items removed, get back in positive credit position. Dynamic Solutions 2, life-changing dynamic financial solutions.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and our guest tonight is Vince Font, the author of American Sons, The Untold Story of the Falcon and the Snowman. So, Vince, now, they grab him at the hamburger stand, and they bring him back. Then they put him in that Colorado maximum security prison you were talking about?
That actually happened much later.
Okay.
He was sentenced to Lompoc, and then he was on escape for 19 months, and he was brought back, and he was placed at Marion, which is another hardcore place. Most of the time that Chris did in prison was in solitary confinement, which I would think would be preferable if you were somebody who was a fish out of water and didn't know how to defend yourself, from attack or something like that. And 10 years of the 24 years, 25 years that he was in prison were spent in solitary confinement, not all at once, but 6 years of that was in, 24/7 lockdown with 1 hour a week to go outside. And I asked him about that. I said, didn't you feel safer when you were in there because you didn't have people, potentially sneaking up behind you? And he said, after you've been in a room with yourself for 48 hours, you're so hungry for conversation or for the presence of another person that you don't really care if the other person has a knife or, or some sort of a deadly weapon in their hand. You just want to see another person. Yeah, a lot, and the guards, they're instructed not to talk to the prisoners in segregation. He would have routine visits from physician, and the psychologist would come around once every month or a quarter or so. But the extent of the conversation there was just, are you having headaches? Are you able to sleep? And that was just about it. They were just kind of checking the list off. There was no real opportunity for any kind of either communication or any kind of therapy at all, for that matter.
But did he still have support from his family? Was he getting visits and stuff like that? Phone calls?
Most of his family, since they lived in California, and when he was transferred to Marion, it was in Indiana, they couldn't get out to see him, obviously. He did, and mainly as a result of the movie, he did get a lot of
mail,
fan mail.
Mm.
So he corresponded with people via letters and things like that. But one of the constant relationships that he had, friendships that he had, was that with Kate, who eventually became his wife. But at the time, she was, like I said, a parole advocate working for Dalton Lee's release. And in interviewing Chris, asking him if there was anything that he had to offer that he could, help provide, because she was just putting together briefs every 2 years to present to the parole board, which were routinely rejected. And they had a platonic friendship that went on for about 20 years. And around the time that he was released from prison, it was just, sort of the natural progression of things to get married.
How old were they when he got out?
He was 49 and she was 48.
Okay.
Dalton Lee was released from prison in 1996, 96 or 97. Get my years right, but yeah, he was released after roughly just over 20 years. And Kate had a friendship with Dalton Lee. One of the points we talk on in the book is, and treat sort of in a sensitive manner, was the fact that Dalton Lee had developed feelings for Kate, because she was sort of the one constant person that was always there for him, and the sort of a beacon of freedom, somebody that was fighting to help him get out of prison. And their friendship essentially ended when Christopher Boyce was released from prison, and Christopher Boyce married Kate.
Really? That was the straw, huh?
That was you feel sorry for the guy, because you think, first of all, he was culpable in the crime of espionage. Nobody held a gun to his head. But at the same time, he sort of had lived all his life for the last 20 years in prison, sort of thinking that Christopher Boyce was his boogeyman that was responsible for every bad thing in his life. And then at the very end, he takes the girl too.
Oh. But from the movie, it looks like Dalton was the screw up that caused everything to fall apart.
I think that he became greedy, and I think that probably the drugs didn't help any. And he made some stupid decisions that led to their arrest. But I think that they would have been caught eventually anyway. But yeah, the one person who knows Dalton Lee the best, besides Chris, from having grown up with the guy, is Kate Boyce. And she has a big problem with the way Sean Penn portrayed him on screen. First of all, he didn't have a little pencil mustache. He had a nice big, thick, Tom Selleck mustache. And he wasn't as, according to her, he wasn't as whiny as he was portrayed in the movie. Sean Penn really stole the show with that performance, but it wasn't necessarily an accurate portrayal of the real man, any more than Timothy Hutton's portrayal was not really a portrayal of Christopher Boyce. When you get to know Christopher Boyce, he's actually a very light-hearted person, which is surprising. Timothy Hutton portrayed him as a very, dark and stoic and serious person. But, that was obviously the actor's choices.
Amazing. Okay, there's something in here about something about watching 3 Days of the Condor.
Oh man, yeah. When I was researching the book and just interviewing Chris, and he told me that I should watch the movie 3 Days of the Condor with Robert Redford, which came out in 1975 or so, and this was right in the middle of when he worked at TRW, and he was in the midst of selling secrets to the Soviets. When I started watching the movie, I became convinced that this was the movie that inspired Christopher Boyce to do what he did, because it was a really romantical sort of, CIA coming after you type thing. It was Robert Redford portrayed a guy who worked as a telex operator in this small, I think it was like a publishing company or something, but he was running the little communications machine. And one day he shows up to work and comes back from lunch, and all of his workmates have been assassinated by CIA agents or something like that, and then they're hot on his trail. But the similarities to the character, especially with the type of job that he had, were so striking that I thought, was this the movie that maybe tripped something in his head? I thought, because at some point you have to think that he thought that being a quote unquote spy, especially at that age, was something of a romantic notion, that he learned later on or soon enough that wasn't the case. But when I asked him about it, he said, no. He said, I went to see the movie with my girlfriend during the time that we were already involved in selling secrets to the Russians. Yet the similarities in character were so eerie to him that he left the movie theater almost convinced that somebody had made that movie, under the pretext of freaking him out.
With the Sentinel
So
message,
he left the theater kind of looking over his shoulder. But it's a fascinating movie. You should watch it.
Oh, 3 Days of the Condor. Are you kidding me? I've seen it a bunch of times. I love that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I had never seen it until a couple of years ago, and I was fairly blown away.
I actually saw it with my dad when I was a kid, back when it first came out in movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Classic record. But, yeah. One of the things that a lot of people that I wanted to mention was that we speak about in depth in the book was the subject of damage assessment with regards to the reason why Chris and Dalton were eventually released from prison. The parole board continually would come back with their rejections and say, these are the reasons why we think that this individual shouldn't be released from prison. And they had not conducted a fair damage assessment on what the actual damages had been to the United States government as a result of them selling these secrets to the Soviet Union. So Kate went about trying to find out, and she said, well, at the time the Soviet Union had collapsed, so there was no such thing anymore as the KGB. It was now the FSB, which is really, I think, semantics. But she reached out to the KGB headquarters in Moscow had become a museum in the meantime. And she made contact with somebody there and asked, I would like to find out if there were any records, any KGB records on Christopher Boyce and Andrew Dalton Lee to indicate, the level of damage or that they may have caused the United States, because she was looking, for that information, and they essentially revealed to her that they had no record of either man because they were never really considered valuable assets to the Soviet Union. And that was one of the things that played a big part in them being successfully paroled, was having the actual KGB, former KGB, saying, there was really not much harm done to your country because of the fact that the information they passed to them was not worth as much as they thought it was.
Yeah, there was nothing significant, you're trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't take away the intent, obviously. And like I said, I'm a friend of, I consider myself a friend of Chris's, but I'm not an apologist for what he did. I think that he went to prison as he should have. And there are a lot of people who say, he should rot in prison. He shouldn't be a free man. But I always say, well, he did rot in prison for, 25 years. And that sort of gets into the whole question about rehabilitation and whether or not people being sent to prison, are they there really to be rehabilitated, or are they there as a punitive sort of thing to be punished?
Well, now you have so many people in prison just for the profit motive.
Yeah, big business.
It's become such a huge business. Yeah, we have a friend of our show here, Reverend Edward Pinkney, who's 66 years old, and he's doing 7 years in prison right now. Right now, as we sit here tonight, he's sitting in a very serious prison. They just moved him further away from his friends and family, and the crime he was convicted for and put in prison for 7 years was he was trying to recall the mayor in Michigan. No, he was trying to recall the mayor, and there's 4 signatures on a petition that aren't quite kosher according to the opinion of the judge. And they gave him 7 years in prison. He's sitting there right now tonight. So,
wow.
I know. And listen, I don't know about you guys, but I've met guys. I've had to go to prisons and interview witnesses and stuff like that. And I've been in jails all over the place. And I can't stop thinking that right now tonight, that guy I talked to, he's there right now tonight, Yeah. I get to walk out and forget the whole thing like it never happened. But, these are people, they made a mistake in their life. Now they're rotting away. And it's no joke. And the conditions are horrible. We just had on George Christie, former head of the Hells Angels, was just on our show. And he's another guy in his 60s, just got out of prison. So now, how was Chris?
The experience of knowing Chris and Kate and hearing his story has really kind of transformed a lot of my beliefs. Like I said, I don't believe that what he did was right or altruistic or anything like that. I can understand sort of why he did it. I would never have done that myself, obviously.
What does he think about Snowden and stuff like that? Does he mention Snowden to you?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, and again, we have this on our website at the falconandthesnowman.com, where around about the time that the Snowden story broke, there was a sudden surge of interest in hearing from Christopher Boyce, because somebody wrote an article called The Falcon and the Snowden, and they were sort of kind of drawing parallels in a way, because I think it's because both guys were in their 20s, and it was, if you ask Chris, he does not believe that what he did is the equivalent of what Edward Snowden did. What Edward Snowden did, in his opinion, was something honorable and right, and trying to, and doing it in a proper way, not necessarily through proper channels, but in a proper way, with good intentions, as opposed to just turning around and selling secrets to an enemy state.
But Snowden has this from the comfort of time, that he's seen how these other guys have done it, and he says, well, I'm going to do it a different way. If not for Falcon and the Snowman, perhaps he would have tried the same way as well. He might have been hopping over the wall in Mexico over there. You know what I mean?
It's entirely possible. And I did ask Chris that. I said, don't you wish that you had like WikiLeaks back then? And he said, oh, of course, I might have done something different. But he didn't have that avenue open to him at the time to sort of to give him an opportunity to air the real reasons why he was acting out, which was the fact that the United States was meddling in the affairs of an ally country. And he just had indignation and anger, and he sort of wanted to strike back in the only way he knew how, because he had access to these documents. And
well, let me ask you this, okay? Now he's a smart guy, you know. He didn't realize, he's a savvy guy too. He didn't realize this going in there to work for these contractors that the U.S. government and the CIA were overthrowing foreign governments and doing all this kind of stuff. He didn't know this.
Apparently not. I mean, believe it or not, I mean, his prison experiences may have transformed a lot of his beliefs, but he's actually a very conservative person. He was raised in a conservative household. I think he was rebelling at the time, like I did when I was his age, when I was that age, rebelling from my father's beliefs and things like that. But he grew up kind of surrounded by authority figures in authority figures that work for the government, like for the FBI and things like that. And he really didn't. It really came as a shock to him. And it was a different time, but that's not to say that everybody back then believed that the USA was up to all good.
Yeah. How old is he today?
Today he is 62.
Okay.
So he'll kill me if I had an extra year. So yeah, it'll be 62.
Okay. And he hasn't talked or communicated with Snowden or anything like that, right? Is he still on parole?
He has not communicated with Snowden, other than he does. He is somewhat active on Twitter,
okay,
which is a bit of a shock, but because of the fact that he, somebody that goes to prison in 1977 at the age of 24 and comes out in 2002 at the age of 49 really missed the whole technical revolution, and so he still uses like a flip cell phone. He never answers and things like that, but he does. Email, and he does get on social media from time to time, and he has not directly communicated with Snowden, but I know he certainly follows his tweets. But
we just had a guest on, Betty Metzger, who wrote the book The Burglary, about the activists back in the 70s that broke into the FBI headquarters and discovered the COINTEL program.
Yeah.
And she just met with Snowden, not even 2 weeks ago. All the burglars who broke into the FBI and Betty Metzger all had a seminar here in the United States. They're on a panel, and Snowden appeared on the panel as well on a TV screen from Moscow.
I did see that, yeah.
Yeah, that's Betty should be coming back to tell us about her experience with Snowden. Wouldn't it be great if we can get on Mr. Boyce on as well, the same show?
I would like that. I think that he's a much more eloquent speaker than I am.
Oh, no, you're great.
Much better. I'm a much better writer than I am a speaker, but he is every bit as eloquent when he speaks. He's very, I don't want to call him reclusive, but he shies away from the public eye. At the time when the Snowden story broke, CNN called, they did a phone interview with him, and then they did an on-set interview with him and Kate about the book, and he kind of exhausted himself in that area, and he's really content right now with leading really what he wants to do, which is just lead a quiet life, where he can fly his Falcons, and he still does that. Yeah, but hopefully, maybe someday.
Yeah,
I'd like that.
I like to view him very quietly. So it doesn't disturb him. Now, one of the things you mentioned here, though, is back at the TRW Black Vault. You're saying that they found Andrew Dalton Lee's fingerprint inside the vault somehow, and you guys are convinced that it was planted there?
Well, I that's what I believe, because that's what Chris, Kate, and Dalton believe as well. The Black Vault was so tightly guarded that even supervisors couldn't get in there without notice. The fact that the FBI or the CIA found a thumbprint on one of the safes in the Black Vault was when Andrew Dalton found that out, from what I understand, he was very, very troubled when he heard that, because he knew he had never been in there before. So he saw essentially that it was insurance to ensure that he was prosecuted.
Did these guys even go to trial on this? Or they went to trial, or they
they went to trial.
They both went to trial, huh?
Mm-hmm. With a jury of their peers. And I know that there were a couple of, and it came close to, there were a couple of holdouts who, on both of their juries, as I remember, who didn't want to vote guilty because they had sympathy for them. But ultimately,
okay, so for Boyce, now when he was captured, he gave a lengthy statement to the police. He cooperated with everybody. Basically gave a confession, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then what was his defense then when he went to trial? Oops.
Not guilty by reason of youth. Yeah, that's a good question. I've seen the book. I've seen the movie, read the book a couple of times. The extent of my knowledge of the trial and everything is really based on my reading the book. It's not something that I really went into in depth when I was researching this book, which was everything that came afterwards.
Well, there's a lot of things you can do. If you're a defendant and you confess, you can later on try and say the confession was coerced. It was you get it thrown out because, maybe you weren't read your rights. There's a lot of ways you can challenge the confessions, and a lot of times you lose that challenge and they bring it in anyway.
Are you ready to change your life but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Well, there's a lot of things you can do. If you're a defendant and you confess, you can later on try and say the confession was coerced. It was you get it thrown out because, maybe you weren't read your rights. There's a lot of ways you can challenge the confessions, and a lot of times you lose that challenge and they bring it in anyway. I don't
remember hearing anything about either of those scenarios. I mean, other than the fact that maybe they were contesting some of the charges or something. I'm not quite.
Okay, and so, but both guys say that it's impossible for Dalton because he was never in that vault.
Right. Yeah. And if you ask Chris, he just sort of shrugs his shoulders and said, "Well, yeah, they planted it. Obviously, they knew that he was guilty, that we were guilty, and they were just, putting incontrovertible evidence to present that he was of his guilt."
That's interesting, though, because why would the government need to place Dalton in that room when it's just as much of a crime that Boyce was taking the documents and passing them on to Dalton outside the room, in the street or at a party,
That I don't understand. I mean, I think that maybe, I don't understand the legalities of it or the technicalities of it, but I would imagine that they just wanted this final nail just to make absolutely sure.
Well, I can say this here. I've seen prosecutors lie a million times, and sometimes you're right. Even when they're lying, their story doesn't even benefit them, or fit the case. So much when you get to trial, it's just there's so much lying on both sides. You always assume that your clients are lying to you, but the prosecution too, man. It's just amazing. Now, you said something about thoughts on surveillance during writing the book. You felt you were under surveillance, did you say?
Oh, man. Well, I tell you, it's not that Christopher Boyce really has anything of value today for the authorities. But I'm sure that he's being surveilled to some level. Every time I would call his house and talk to either one of them, I would always make a joke about, keeping it clean for the people who were listening on the other line. And I'm not somebody who's typically given to paranoia or anything, but I had an experience once while I was working on the book that it could be written off to something that just happens, but I had an entire chunk of the book that I was writing just disappear from my hard drive. Everything that I did to try and recover it failed. I ended up rewriting that portion of the book essentially off of memory, and I think it was actually better the second time around. But I am not saying that some happy-go-lucky NSA agent thought, well, I'm gonna mess with this SOB who thinks it's cute to write a book with Christopher Boyce and try to make a few bucks. So he, ruined a couple of weeks of my work. But at the same time, it made me a little bit nervous that maybe somebody somewhere was not happy with it. Because, before we had finished work on the book, we had announced it already. He was interviewed by CNN when we were still working on the book. And we, kind of put in a plug for the book and said he's working on a book called American Sons, and it'll be out, in a couple of months. So it wasn't exactly top secret, but yeah, I've asked Chris and Kate, and they both sort of nod their head and wink and believe that it's possible that he may be still under some sort of surveillance, just out of a desire to see him misstep and maybe send him back to prison.
What does he do for a living now?
Well, I'm sorry?
What does he do for a living now?
He is in the house, what do you call that, flipping business.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And actually doing relatively well. When he got out of prison, he had trouble finding work. One of the first jobs that he was able to get, because your parole is conditional on finding employment, and he had to apply for a job at Petco, PetSmart, one of those type places. And this was in San Francisco, where he was released to. And during the interview, the person interviewing him looked down at his name and said, "Are you you're Christopher Boyce, the Christopher Boyce?" And he said, "Yeah." And the guy said, "Oh, my little sister played your little sister on the movie."
Oh, wow. Get out of here.
So by that stroke of luck, he said, "Oh, you're hired." But which is it's a very, very small world.
Now you're still in touch with him, like up until today?
Oh yeah. I mean, he's a bit of a hard man to get a hold of because, like I said, he doesn't answer his cell phone. He does his work, and then he goes out and flies his Falcons. And I've had the opportunity to go out with him. It's a really interesting sport. I don't know if it's something that I could get into, but it's more of it strikes me as more of a religion than an actual hobby, because there's so much work involved as far as training the birds and keeping them and feeding them and being very patient with them. I don't think I would have that level of patience, but it's the one place where he is able to find real solace, I think, because it's the one constant that's remained, that ties him to his youth before everything went bad in his life.
Well, now today, since it seems like so much of the story is more interesting than the original story, the prison break and all that kind of stuff, how come there isn't another movie?
Well,
without talking in Sean Penn.
You're right. We have had inquiries, but we have not had anything inked. We've had kind of, I guess, what you call celebrity endorsements. Oddly enough, one celebrity who was a big follower of Chris and who absolutely loved the book was the comedian Kathy Griffin. And she tweeted about the book to all 1.5 million of her fans on Twitter. And, we have people who are kind of rooting for the book. These days, though, the publishing industry is in such a state that you don't write a book to make $1 million anymore.
Yeah, that's the truth.
And the book itself, we decided to self-publish it because of the fact that, it's not written in a traditional memoir manner. The book, when we sat down to write it, originally it was going to be told in the first person from Kate's perspective as somebody who is, she's a 3-4 time cancer survivor, and she has a lot of history, and clearly with working on the parole for Dalton Lee and Christopher Boyce, and it was going to be her story originally. And then Chris became involved, and he wanted to make sure that his story was told accurately, because he didn't think that his story had been told accurately in his previous 2 books, written by Robert Lindsay, who is actually a really, really awesome guy who read this book and loved it so much that he wrote a review about it for us and everything. And he's become a friend, and him and Chris have gotten back in touch again after all these years. But yeah, the book is a very non-conventional, written in a very non-conventional style. And I think it's hard to sell if it's written in a non-conventional style as opposed to being a carbon copy of what everybody else has done in the past. When we set out to write the book, I kind of said, I want to Tarantino it up a little bit.
Oh, really?
To which they looked at me and said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I want it to be a little bit more interesting of a read than a traditional boring biography where everything is told in chronological order. The story in the book starts out in 2005, and then it goes into flashbacks, and Kate, her chapters are written in the first person, Chris's chapters are written in the third person. What's interesting about that is that the constantly shifting gears of the writing style in the book have led to a lot of people telling us that they read it in one day, which for the 350-page book is not that's not a small thing to say about it. But on the same token, I think that a lot of people think that the story was told and don't really understand that everything that came afterwards, especially to my perspective, when I found out that the real story and all the drama actually occurred after the convictions, whereas the movie, told the story of the crime and ended with them being sent to prison. But there's so much to the story that the book encompasses the 25 years of their lives.
Now, Kate's cancer, was that while they were in prison as well, or that came about after?
No, she developed cancer in 1998. At that time, Dalton Lee's parole was secured. He was set to be released, and she was set to represent Christopher Boyce at a parole hearing. And she was in the midst of working on all these papers in addition to her day job as a paralegal. She actually put off getting treatment for cancer because she wanted to work on Chris's parole brief, which he protested. He he told her several occasions, you need to take care of yourself. I'll still be here in a couple of years. You may not be here in a couple of years. You need to take care of yourself. And she said no, which I think was evidence at that point that there was more feeling involved. There was more feelings between them than just a friendship or a client and a parole rep. But she did successfully undergo surgery and treatments and had a couple of recurrences afterwards. And to this day, she's still kicking. She's in remission right now.
Okay. But now, they're saying that there was no romance at all while he was in prison?
No, I mean, other than...
It's a friendship.
Yeah, other than what I believe to have been something of a mutual attraction, there was no, conjugal visits or anything like that. It was really just a friendship. To hear her talk, it's funny because she is completely against women who marry criminals who are in prison. Like recently had the 18-year-old girl who wanted to marry Charles Manson and right. Things like that. She's not somebody who would ever do anything like that, and she feels strongly against that. So I think she guarded herself from those things. Clearly, he was, he had nothing to lose. He was in prison, so I'm sure he had, his feelings that he was just experiencing. But she had, relationships, during the time that she knew both men and the time she was representing them. And I think that probably the last thing on her mind was that she would ever get married to Christopher Boyce, but that's actually what happened. And, it's worked out well for them.
Okay. And you said here in the notes too, that, while he was awaiting parole release, he wrote an article criticizing the prison system, and they threw him in solitary confinement for that?
Yeah, that's how he ended up in ADX Florence in Colorado with the Unabomber and was it Terry Nichols. After his Senate subcommittee testimony, a couple of the senators that were really moved by his story petitioned for him to get sent to a state prison, to get out of federal prison and to get into a state prison where he could get an education. And he got a college degree when he was in Oak Park Heights prison in Minnesota. And while he was there, he was approached by the local newspaper, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and they asked him if he'd be willing to write a series of articles about life in prison. Because, by then the movie had come out and he was more well known. And he would write these really eloquent articles. One of the last straw article was there was a prisoner who was in, this was a state prison now. There was a prisoner who was in there and he had murdered another inmate. And he was, according to Chris, he was left to remain in general population. And that sort of really kind of offended his sensibilities because it reminded him a lot of the first prison that he had been in the early 80s, the gladiator school type scenario in Lompoc. So he wrote this article that was critical of that particular prison. And essentially the minute that was published, the warden said, I'm done with you. I don't want you here in my prison anymore. And he eventually got transferred back into the federal system. At this point, he'd already been given a parole date. So his last couple of years prior to being paroled were spent in a maximum security prison with, like I said, he actually, he didn't communicate with the Unabomber, but he saw Kaczynski and he saw all these other people that were held there with him. For the last year of his sentence before he was released, he was finally transferred to a prison in Oregon. And that was sort of a wind down sentence, I suppose, leading up to actual parole. But yeah, he was in there with the
Unabomber, huh?
The Unabomber and some of the worst of the worst. And to hear that place was the absolute worst, because it's just a place where you have absolutely no contact with anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the one where they had John Gotti in there, and you could watch the videos at the end of his life when he's talking to his daughter. He was half crazy, you know?
Yeah, and I don't understand how he could possibly have made it through the prison system for as long as he did without either going crazy or without becoming a complete thug. I think that speaks quite a bit to his character, and the fact that, you know, the crime he committed when he was younger was something that really was, you know, something that he greatly regretted having done. And, you know, if he hadn't made that misstep, he probably would have been, you know, like a history teacher or something like that, just leading a normal, quiet life somewhere.
Yeah, well, we've had, like I said before, we've had other guests that have done, you know, 20 years. We had Ramona Africa, who was from the group Move, and, you know, they burned her alive practically and then shot at her when she was trying to escape and gave her 15 years. And then we had Lorenzo Kumbawa Irvin, one of the Black Panthers, who hijacked the plane, and he got 2 life sentences. He got out after, I think it was 15 years, 20 years. And these are all guys, they're still activists. They're still, you know, very intelligent people, very kind, loving people, as a matter of fact, you know. So there is hope after prison. And these are people, too, that were kept in solitary and all kinds of abusive conditions while they're in prison. George Christie as well, you know, he went through it. And a very likable guy now. Talking to another, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say that's, you know, and that's not something that, like I said, never having been exposed to anybody that's been in prison or anything like that. It was really an eye opener for me. You know, from what I hear, Andrew Dalton Lee is also somebody who's stayed out of trouble ever since he was released from prison. You know, like I said, these guys were in their early 20s when they did this, and although I wasn't that kind of hellraiser when I was in my early 20s, I know that there were some people who, you know, who were just susceptible to going off in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Let me ask this about Dalton Lee, though. What is he doing now?
I don't know. There's not any communication between Dalton Lee and Christopher Boyce, although I do think that Chris wouldn't mind seeing Dalton again, because, you know, he has no hard feelings. I think Dalton Lee still has hard feelings.
But we don't know what he does for a living or anything like that?
No.
Have you tried to locate him?
No, because I don't think he wants to be located, and I wouldn't want to pursue him in that way.
Okay. And he didn't do any media or anything after your book came out?
No,
anything?
He executed like the perfect exit from prison, that nobody knew that he had been released from prison. I mean, there's not even any newspaper articles, if you search, that discuss his release, other than the fact that, you know, you find the occasional Sean Penn interview or article about Sean Penn that says that he hired him as a personal assistant after he was released. But aside from that, there was really no press whatsoever. He just wanted to be released from prison and left alone.
Very interesting. Okay, so what do you think, Vince? Is there anything we left out of the story tonight that I forgot to ask you?
Nothing. I mean, the fact of the matter is that I think the interview has kind of been a little bit scattered, but it's also scattered in a similar way that the book is laid out, because the story goes from one crazy place to another, and it's really it's a tough story to tell in a chronological manner. But yeah, I mean, the book itself has received nothing but excellent reviews. We got one-star review from somebody who said it was a well-written book, but they couldn't stand that Christopher Boyce was freed from prison. So they gave it a 1-star review. But other than that, you know, it's been very well received. And actually right now we've just started making autographed copies available on the website. So if anybody's interested in that, head over to falconandthesnowman.com, thefalconandthesnowman.com, which I was kind of shocked was available as a URL when I bought it, but that's the official website.
Yeah, that's true. You think somebody would have picked that up? Okay, now what about real quick these other books that you've written? Give us a little brief description of them.
Oh, I'm not a guy who ever thought I would ever write a nonfiction book. My main love has always been kind of the Rod Serling Twilight Zone type short stories, and I got a couple of things on Amazon that are quite different from American Sons, but it might be something of interest to people, especially heading into the Halloween season.
Okay. All right, so we got a link to those books too. What are the names of those two, Vince?
I have a black comedy horror book called Gnome Way Out, and I got a short story called Night Visit on there, and more to come soon.
Okay, great. And then we have links to those books on the Opperman Report blogspot.com. Mr. Vince Font, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Ed. It was my pleasure, and I appreciate you taking the time and entertaining me this evening.
No, this is a great story, and I'm really glad I had you on because I didn't know about half of this story. I didn't know anything about the bank robberies. I didn't know anything about the prison escape. You know, I watched it. I said, yeah, I'll do some research on the story. I'll watch the movie, you know. And there was so much. So I really suggest people to pick up your book there, The American Sons, The Untold Story of the Falcon and the Snowman, and get filled in on some of this other information. Really, the iconic historical story and event and a great movie. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you again.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Okay, so then we had Vince Font, the author of American Sons, The Untold Story of the Falcon and the Snowman. Really great. I appreciate you coming on, Vince. What we're going to do now is, let me think, because all the timing's all screwed up. I got to end the show. I got to say goodnight over to PSN. Good night, guys. Thanks for having us. I'm sorry about the screw up at the beginning of the show. Good night over there. I got to go over here, and I got to shut off PSN. Okay. Good night, PSN. Wait, is that PSN? I got to double check. I want to shut off the wrong station. Okay, that is PSN. Good night, PSN. Good night. Thanks, Angel. Good night. Okay, now in the after show, hopefully, I'm hoping to get a phone call from what's his name, Jim Farrell from the Bernie Sanders campaign manager for the state of Nevada. I'm hoping he'll call in. I'm going to be talking about Bernie Sanders. If Jeff and Deborah want to call in and heckle me about Bernie Sanders, you're welcome to call in 702-605-4894. If Broly, my chat room heckler tonight, wants to call in and complain about our guest tonight, about the topic tonight and all this stuff, you can call in if you want, 702-605-4894. I got some kind of funny stories to tell you about Mark Harris. Check out the Spreaker and the iHeart and the YouTube channel because I did an interview with Mark Harris, who used to be a frequent guest on Howard Stern, and he wrote that song, I'm a gay papa. Okay. And so I made the mistake of getting into a little. By the way, he's a great big Trump supporter right now. So I did about an hour and a half with him. It was supposed to be 1 hour, keep it nice and neat. But he just goes on with these stories about having a knife pulled on him and fighting over prescription drugs. And anyway, he's a Trump supporter now. And what do you call it? Trump actually knows all about us now. Forget it. Okay? Because there's a whole thing going on. I'll get into all of it after we get into the after show. So let's see if I can pull all this off here because the timing is all screwed up because of the way we had to do this tonight. Okay, I'm going to play a commercial here for Awake. See you guys in 3 minutes. And then I'm going to stop, guys who are listening in on Spreaker. I'm going to reboot Spreaker, and then we're going to start the after show. So good night, everybody. Thank you so much. And now a word from our sponsors. OppermanReport.com. Hey, do you like what you're hearing? Do you like the work that you see us doing here at Opperman Report? You can support that work by becoming a member at OppermanReport.com. And as you have access to over 200 exclusive shows and interviews that you can't find on YouTube or Spreaker or iHeart or iTunes or KYAH. You can't find them anywhere else online, exclusive to our member sections, to our members. Also, too, there's images, videos, documents, court docs. And don't forget, you can hear your ad played here on the Opperman Report, reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis because the show is repeated every day all over the world. Contact me at oppermanreport@gmail.com and I'll give you a good deal on advertising rates.
Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with pure soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
Is your credit in bad shape? Do you need a new car? Ready to buy a new house? You want to rent an apartment? Are you going to apply for a job? Any one of these activities, they're going to ask for a credit report and then check out your credit score. Let Dynamic Solutions 2 erase your negative credit remarks. They offer a life-changing, dynamic financial solution. The finest in fast, professional, affordable credit repair. They have affordable monthly prices. They accept Visa, MasterCard, PayPal options available. You go to www.dynamicsolutions2, that's the number 2.com, or call 424-888-2820. Now, if you enter promo code ED or you mention Ed Opperman, you get a 10% discount. How's that? You get a free consultation, all negative items removed, get back in positive credit position. Dynamic Solutions 2, life-changing dynamic financial solutions.
Hey you, podcast listener, this is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. Take the blue pill. You wake up in your bed and go back to listening to mundane podcasts that won't challenge your religious beliefs and your so-called truths about reality, the universe, and consciousness. Take the red pill. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast, hosted by Mark Anthony Peterson, and he will show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Event Horizon takes a walk into the paranormal with a splash of conspiracy. It's the podcast that would be born if David Icke and the X-Files had a baby. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast by Mark Anthony Peterson on Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Stitcher, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms. Remember, all we are offering is the truth, nothing more.